Okay, so you want to own a medieval monastery. Perfect. From the road, it looks like a fortune built from stone. Fields stretch beyond the walls. Barns are packed with grain. Hundreds of sheep turn grass into valuable wool. Tenants bring rent through the gate. Pilgrims and nobles arrive with gifts. For a moment, this looks like the safest business in medieval England. Then the mill wheel stops. A wool cart overturns in the mud. Rain breaks through the storehouse roof. 3 tenants arrive with excuses instead of money. By sunset, the monastery still controls thousands of acres. It simply cannot pay the men repairing the roof. So where did all the wealth go? And what do you actually own when everything is valuable except the cash box? That is the real economics of a medieval monastery. Our setting is England between roughly 1250 and 1350. Soil, weather, roads, markets, royal favor, and church politics all changed the result. The surviving evidence gives us charters, estate records, accounts, buildings, legal disputes, and archaeology. It does not give us one perfect ledger for one imaginary monastery. We will separate known evidence, estimates, modeled figures, and unknowns. First, define the asset. You're not really buying one church. A monastery was not the private property of one monk. For this thought experiment, you control the institution through its leadership. The visible asset is the religious complex. The economic asset is a network of land, labor, buildings, rights, and obligations. Inside the walls sit the church, cloister, dormitory, refectory, kitchen, infirmary, guest hall, stores, and workshops. Beyond them sit fields, pasture, woodland, mills, barns, orchards, fish ponds, roads, and tenant farms. A wealthy house might control several distant agricultural granges. Those farms supplied food and raw materials and sometimes produced a surplus for sale. The church gives the institution its purpose. The estate gives it economic endurance. What part of the monastery actually makes the money? Is it the church? Could it be the farmland? Perhaps the sheep? Maybe the mill? Or the tenants? Or is the real asset the legal right to collect from all of them? It matters more than the height of the tower. Now ask who controls the operation. An abbot or prior sits at the top, while senior officers divide money, stores, hospitality, estates, buildings, and care beneath him. It still has departments, budgets, and people blaming each other. The leadership inherits every promise attached to the property. Donors may expect prayers forever. Powerful patrons may expect hospitality whenever they arrive. A neighboring lord may dispute a meadow. The crown may demand money or service. Land creates income. Land also creates arguments. Legal rights can be more valuable than masonry. A charter may protect a market privilege. A boundary agreement may secure pasture. Lose a barn, and you lose storage. Lose a field, and you lose one stream of output. Lose a right, and income can disappear for generations. This creates the second open loop. Can the monastery become poorer without losing a single building? We will return to that when someone moves a boundary marker. Now examine the starting position. The church already stands. Beside it, the mill already turns. Grain already fills the barns. Sheep already graze in the pasture. Tenants already owe rent. This looks cheaper than starting from nothing. It is also how you inherit problems no one warned you about. One roof has been patched 3 times. The mill gear sounds wrong, a tenant is months late, and the fish pond bank is soft after rain. You inherit assets. You also inherit maintenance, obligations, and old grudges. Cash reserves, therefore, matter immediately. You need seed, stored food, timber, iron fittings, carts, harness, healthy animals, wax, parchment, cloth, salt, ale, and wages. The monastery may be worth a fortune. The carpenter still wants cash. A barn full of grain is wealth. It is not ready money until grain is sold. A flock is wealth. It cannot pay a mason until wool reaches a buyer. Liquidity turns property into survival. That creates the third open loop. How much wealth should remain idle as cash? More land may raise future income. But one empty cash box can stop every repair at once. Hold that question until the bills arrive. Now look at labor. Monks pray, study, administer, supervise, and perform religious duties. Lay brothers, tenants, and hired workers manage farms, workshops, and distant granges. Shepherds protect flocks while carters move grain and wool. Millers, bakers, brewers, masons, and carpenters keep the machinery and buildings alive. A monastery is a religious household resting on a broad labor pyramid. The people most visible in the church are not always the people lifting the heaviest sacks. Remember that when we ask who produces the surplus. For now, watch one ordinary morning. The bell calls the monks to prayer. A grain cart waits outside the gate while the clerk argues over the measure. Inside, the kitchen wants flour while the miller demands the grain immediately. Meanwhile, the guest master reports 8 unexpected travelers. Before breakfast ends, the carpenter reports that the guest hall roof moved overnight. Nothing has collapsed yet. The day is already expensive. Now follow the revenue. Rent may arrive as cash, grain, livestock, labor, or an inconvenient mixture of all four. Grain rent supplies food or saleable inventory but requires dry storage. Labor rent reduces hired wages but requires supervision. Cash is flexible and often late. Wool is another major stream. A large flock converts pasture into portable value that can travel farther than grain. Some monasteries even sold future wool in advance. That brings cash forward, while promising away tomorrow's fleece. Grain feeds the household, supports hospitality, pays some workers, and creates saleable surplus. It also rots, spills, attracts pests, and loses value when damp. The mill may provide steadier fees, but only while water, timber, stone, and labor keep one machine turning. Donations add cash, land, objects, or new obligations. Not every valuable gift improves liquidity. Now the first major action begins. A line of carts waits at the mill. Rain has made the stream run fast. Inside the gearing, the miller hears a hard knock. Suddenly, the main wheel jumps. A moment later, the grinding stones stop. A loaded cart begins rolling backward in the mud. The driver pulls the reins. 2 workers grab the rear wheel. Another jams a wooden block beneath it. The wagon stops inches from the next cart. A sack falls and bursts across the road. The miller tries to lower the water gate. 3 men pull together. The handle snaps. Water keeps driving the wheel while the stones produce nothing. The carpenter arrives carrying wedges and an axe. His expression says the entire afternoon has been stolen. 2 tenants argue over who arrived first. One shoves the other away from the door. The other tumbles into a pile of empty sacks. Everyone is now furious. Repairs take 6 hours. The monastery loses milling income. Tenants lose working time. Several take their grain elsewhere. One broken lever creates repair cost, missing revenue, and damaged trust. You thought the mill sold flour. It actually sold dependable access to grinding. When access disappears, customers look for another route. The mill answers part of the first open loop. Machinery earns money only because rights, location, and reliability bring people to it. The flock creates its own risks, but shearing season reveals the larger financial danger. Workers clip fleece from morning until evening. A merchant's agent is expected tomorrow. Dark clouds appear before the final carts are loaded. Workers throw sacks onto wagons. One driver adds too many. The wheel sinks into a rut. The cart tilts. 4 sacks slide into the mud. 2 workers dive after them. One loses a boot. Another lands face first in wet grass. Rain begins. The wool is recovered. The merchant's agent arrives the next morning. He squeezes a fleece between his fingers. Then he lowers his offer. The rescue saves the inventory. It does not save the margin. The driver tried to remove one journey. He created extra drying labor, delayed payment, and a lower price. Efficiency without judgment becomes waste. Now examine rent collection. A tenant arrives with half the grain he owes. He says the harvest was weak. The rest will come after market. The steward checks the ledger. 3 nearby tenants have similar problems. This is not one dishonest man. It is a regional shortage. Demand full payment and families may sell seed grain. That weakens next year's harvest. Delay payment and the shortage moves into your own cash box. Credit is not free kindness. It transfers timing risk from tenant to monastery. A complete rent roll measures obligations. It does not measure money collected. The monastery can look rich in claims and poor in coin. Now add hospitality. A noble patron arrives without warning with relatives, servants, horses, and expectations. The guest master runs while the kitchen adds pots, and the brewer opens a reserve barrel. One servant collides with another at the guest hall door. Bread and cups fly through the air, a dog steals the largest loaf, and 3 novices chase it around the cloister. Food is lost, guests wait, and the abbot apologizes. Hospitality converts prestige into expenses very quickly. The patron may leave valuable silverwork that cannot be sold without causing offense. A valuable gift can still worsen cash flow. This brings us back to the third open loop. How much cash should remain unused? Enough to bridge the gap between an urgent bill and a saleable asset. The answer depends on harvest timing, rent timing, market access, repairs, and political demands. Capacity creates wealth. Liquidity lets the institution survive long enough to use it. Now return to legal rights. A neighboring lord claims part of a meadow. His men move a boundary post during the night. The steward notices at dawn. Workers put it back. The lord's men return. Both groups grab the same post. A short tug of war begins in the mud. One man loses his grip. 3 workers fall backward into wet grass. The post lands exactly where it began. The argument solves nothing. Meals, lodging, and legal assistance cost money. The meadow continues growing grass. The right to control it remains uncertain. This answers the second open loop. A monastery can become poorer without losing one building. Losing rent, pasture, woodland, milling rights, or legal protection shrinks the economic estate. The physical estate may still look unchanged. Law can remove the income while leaving every wall standing. Now examine the expense that hides inside every section. Roofs, timber, mortar, ditches, fences, mill gears, carts, harness, and pond banks all wear down. Each repair looks postponable until the exact hour it becomes unavoidable. This creates the fourth open loop. Which small expense can destroy the entire year? The answer is deferred maintenance, a chain of small bills that were ignored. Leave one roof leak, stored grain becomes damp. Damp grain loses value. Lower value reduces cash. Lower cash delays the roof again. A small crack becomes a financial loop. The building is not just shelter, it is part of the inventory system. Then the winter storm arrives. Wind tears tiles from the storehouse roof. A bell rings across the courtyard. Workers drag ladders through rain. The carpenter shouts for rope. A loose roof panel rises in the wind. 2 workers pull it down. A third slips from the lowest rung and lands safely in a hay pile. Another gust drives rain through the opening. Inside, workers drag grain sacks away from the wet wall. Grain pours across the floor. Novices sweep it into baskets. The opening is covered before dawn. Most of the grain survives, some becomes damp. The rescue reduces the loss. It does not erase labor, materials, and spoilage. Weather creates cost even when disaster is mostly avoided. Now answer the first open loop completely. No single asset makes the money. Fields, flocks, mills, tenants, woodland, ponds, workshops, and gifts each contribute something different. Administration connects them. Records identify obligations, charters protect rights, storage preserves value, and transport moves it. Labor converts land into output. Spiritual prestige attracts gifts. The economic engine still runs on land, labor, management, and enforceable claims. You are not buying a church with extra farmland. You are controlling an estate network that finances a church. Now separate the evidence clearly. Known evidence shows that English monasteries could control extensive estates and agricultural granges. Those granges supplied food and raw materials and could produce surpluses for sale. Some houses participated heavily in the wool trade. Mills, fish ponds, livestock, stores, hospitality, and maintenance all formed part of monastic economic life. The exact mix of rent, direct farming, labor, and trade varied widely. No complete account survives for this invented monastery. The following figures are modeled to explain cash flow. Begin with 1,000 modeled units of liquid reserve. These are modeled units, not recovered historical prices. The monastery controls land and buildings worth much more. We are measuring usable cash flow, not total property value. In a good year, harvests are strong. Wool quality is high. Tenants pay close to schedule. The mill remains open. Hospitality stays manageable. Gross usable inflow reaches 2,050 units. Food and household supply consume 410 units. Labor and maintenance consume 520. Livestock, internal supplies, legal duties, storage losses, hospitality, and emergency repairs consume 530. Total modeled cost reaches 1,460. Modeled surplus reaches 590. The result looks excellent. Part of that surplus must prepare for future repairs. The good year has worn carts, roofs, tools, and animals. Now the ordinary year. Harvest is acceptable. Wool prices soften. 2 tenants pay late. The mill closes twice. A cart axle breaks. A boundary dispute creates travel and paperwork. Gross usable inflow reaches 1,720 units. Household supply and labor consumes 710 units. Maintenance, livestock, internal supplies, legal costs, credit losses, hospitality, and emergencies consume 870. Total cost reaches 1,580. Modeled surplus falls to 140. The monastery remains busy all year. The reward is thinner than the walls. Now the weak year. Rain damages harvest quality. Sheep sickness reduces wool. Several tenants delay rent. The mill needs major work. A barn wall must be rebuilt. The guest hall roof leaks again. Gross usable inflow falls to 1,420 units. Food and labor consume 700 units. Maintenance, livestock, supplies, legal costs, credit losses, hospitality, and emergencies consume 980. Total cost reaches 1,680. The modeled loss is 260. All the fields are still there. Nothing has happened to the church. Sheep still cover the pasture. From outside, the institution still looks rich. Inside the accounts, the reserve keeps shrinking. Now the catastrophic outcome. Catastrophe does not require one spectacular event. It only needs several normal problems arriving together. Begin with a weak harvest. Add livestock disease. Add delayed rents. Keep the mill closed. Continue the boundary dispute. Leave the roof damaged. Then spring rain fills the fish ponds faster than the outlet can drain. The pond keeper runs toward the bank. Water pushes through soft earth. Workers arrive with shovels, baskets, and planks. The carpenter orders a timber brace. The gap opens wider. Fish spill into the flooded channel. Workers chase them with baskets. One slides through the mud and hits a stack of empty tubs. The tubs roll across the yard. 2 boys catch fish in the drainage ditch. 3 men brace the bank with planks. The repair holds for a moment. Another section collapses. The water level drops. The monastery loses breeding stock. Future food disappears with them. Future sales disappear too. Emergency labor consumes the rest of the day. The bank still needs rebuilding. At the same moment, the mill remains closed. Tenants carry grain elsewhere. A wool buyer delays payment. Then the noble patron announces another visit. Soon afterward, the bishop sends a messenger. Meanwhile, the reserve falls below the next wage payment. One officer proposes selling grain. Another explains that grain is needed for winter. Someone suggests delaying roof work. The carpenter points at wet beams. The abbot stands in a room full of assets. Almost nothing can become cash without creating another problem. Usable inflow falls to 1,250 modeled units. Total cost rises to 1,930. The modeled loss reaches 680. Wool is sold early at a discount. Repairs are delayed. Future rent is borrowed against. Hired labor is reduced. Reduced labor slows maintenance. Slower maintenance creates more damage. The monastery enters a downward spiral without losing its church. This is the central contradiction resolved. A monastery can be wealthy in property and poor in timing. It can own land, grain, buildings, livestock, and rights, while lacking cash for urgent bills. Now compare the operating models. Direct estate management can capture more production but absorbs more labor, equipment, and weather risk. Tenant rents simplify some operations while shifting part of the production risk outward. Heavy dependence on wool raises exposure to livestock, merchants, transport, and prices. Diversification spreads risk across several streams, but creates more things to supervise and repair. No model removes risk. It only moves it. Now answer who performs most of the work. Tenants, shepherds, millers, carters, cooks, brewers, servants, lay brothers, masons, and carpenters perform most of the physical work. Clerks and stewards keep obligations recorded and rights enforceable. Monastic life gives the institution its religious purpose and continuity. Authority and responsibility sit with the abbot. Through that leadership, the monastery controls the assets. Tenants and workers absorb immediate pressure, while the institution absorbs long-term repair, legal, and liquidity risk. When surplus exists, the monastery keeps it. Much of that surplus returns to reserves, repairs, duties, hospitality, charity, construction, and survival. That is the final answer. Owning a medieval monastery does not mean owning a quiet church surrounded by free labor. It means controlling a complex estate whose income arrives as coin, crops, wool, rent, labor, gifts, and promises. Its obligations arrive just as creatively. The monastery can look permanent, while one broken mill, one wet roof, and one delayed rent cycle consume the reserve. You thought the monastery sold prayer. It actually managed land, labor, rights, storage, credit, and risk to finance prayer. You thought the church building was the business. The real business was the estate behind it, and the cash box was always smaller than the monastery looked.